Joining us now, the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and MSNBC Chief International Analyst, retired Admiral James Stavridis. Always good to see you. You can't look at one without the other at this point, right? I mean, who gets elected president of the United States is obviously critically important to the other members of NATO. But let me start with a general question, because you know NATO as well or better than anyone. What are your big questions as the summit gets underway?
Oh, I think you put your finger on it. It's a tale of two presidents. President one, the current president, all of the other heads of state and government. This is a gathering of eagles. This is peers, the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, some of the biggest economies in the world, all looking at Joe Biden, assessing him, his fitness, his voice pattern, his speech, his gait, all of that. The other president, former President Trump, who may come back again, is part of the quiet conversations off to the side, Chris, where the other NATO countries outside of the United States are talking about, if Trump comes back, what does it mean for the alliance? Can we hang together? Will we have to massively increase our defense spending to accommodate him? All legitimate questions. So that's the back and forth. What I worry about and what I hope is that Ukraine can still stay on the top of the agenda. That's job one for the NATO alliance, to stop Vladimir Putin. So despite the back and forth about the U.S. president and possible president to be, well, let's focus on Ukraine. That's what I'm looking for and hoping for.
Do you think they can do it?
I do, simply because of the exigencies of the battlefield are such that they're being constantly briefed as a group. When I was Supreme Allied Commander, I would go to these summits, prepare briefings. In those days, we talked about Afghanistan. Now the central mission for the alliance is Ukraine. All of that is going to move forward. And as the video you're showing demonstrates, Russia is smashing its way through Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, attacking hospitals, electric plants, water treatment facilities. These are war crimes. They're happening in real time. I think it will break through the drama about the U.S. presidents.
Look, world leaders don't like to get involved in the domestic politics of other countries. But given the stakes and given what you know and the people that you know who are leaders of these various countries, it went through my mind as the question was asked of Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister, do you have any concerns about Biden's age or mental acuity? And he said, good to see everyone here this morning. Could you see it possible to say, I don't get involved in domestic politics. I will only tell you Biden has been a great leader of NATO, or some version of that, if that's what they believe? Or are they just going to duck every time? What possibility do you see for them to in any way get involved in any of this?
I think if you were advising a head of state and government from Canada, Italy, France, Germany, or any of the other NATO companies, you would tell them there's no upside to being involved in this conversation. I think that the furthest they might go is what you just said, Chris. And I think a leader like Trudeau could have said something like that. Look, I have enjoyed my time working alongside President Biden in this alliance. Beyond that, those are issues for Americans to decide, something along those lines. I thought he was a little bit blithe, simply bunting it off and saying, happy to be here today. A little bit of hey, Joe Biden has been a leader in this alliance because it's true. He's been a remarkably strong leader within the NATO alliance.
And probably a little less than the White House might have hoped for. But let me go to ask you a little bit more about the other possibility here. Former President Trump, a wild card. He's called NATO obsolete. He hasn't said much about Ukraine, other than a promise to end the war in a day, but, you know, a little short on details there. So how do you, if you're the leader of another country, navigate the road ahead given the uncertainty?
I think all of the European leaders have three things in their mind when they think about their role in the NATO alliance. One is the spending, the defense spending. The good news is now over 2/3 of the NATO European nations are hitting that 2% of GDP goal. I suspect that's not going to be good enough for a Trump administration. So they're beginning the conversations about, are we going to need to raise defense spending even more? As a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, I would say, look around your neighborhood, look at Vladimir Putin, look at the events in the Middle East just across the Mediterranean from NATO. There's pretty good reason to increase that defense spending. Number two, they're thinking, okay, who is the team that will come in with a Trump administration? People like former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, former ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. These are a team that I think are involved. You're going to be looking at what they're saying. What are they talking about in terms of foreign affairs and international relations? And then third and finally, Chris, I think any of these leaders is assessing their personal relationship. Some have a well-known path with Donald Trump. Emmanuel Macron knows him quite well. I doubt he's ever met the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. So each of them is thinking like any human being would about the personal relationships here. All of that they've got to also compartmentalize, because as we talked about at the top of the show, job one for this alliance is focusing on supporting Ukraine and stopping Vladimir Putin. The alliance can't do that. It's not going to survive.
And that's what NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is trying to do right now as he has begun the opening address. We'll continue to follow that for you. But Admiral James Stavridis, it's always great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.